All right, folks, so let's complete the journey to you becoming a full stack developer. And when you hear people talk about full stack, they're saying, hey, not only can you create the user interface and all the logic that your app is going to need, but you can also take care of the back end of the database, or the back end of your app as well, which is the database, which we are storing in the cloud. So we are going to actually load our data in the Spots class as opposed to Spot. And as we set up Spot to work with it, we want to do things that are very similar to what we did with Spot. We're going to import Firebase. This time, though, we're going to declare our database instance, but we're not going to initialize it. We're going to initialize it in the initializer here. And our primary initializer is only going to have this one line in it. We actually don't have to pass any parameters in because we're initializing everything which is a formal part of the database itself, or of the class itself. So let's go over and take a look at where we are in Spots. And what we're going to do here is simply say, well, first we've got to go ahead and we've got to import Firebase. So import Firebase right here. Then we're going to declare an instance of DB. So we'll say DB : capital Firestore. And then we'll say implicitly unwrapped optional. And then our initializer is just going to be init, open and close parenthesis, no parameters passed in. And we will simply say db equals firestore.firestore with open and close parentheses in here. And the reason why we're doing it here instead of initializing it right away is we're going to have to do a little bit of housekeeping first before we can go ahead and work with the database. So this is the proper way to do this. If you wanted to fool around with different errors and see the errors and see how things would occur if you shuffled some stuff around. But if we do this code, it's going to work and we'll be in good shape. Now let's hop back over and see specifically what we want to do. So in Spots, we're going to create a load data method. And this load data method is going to be kind of interesting. It is going to, we'll set it up with an escaping closure here, and after we've read in all the data, what we're going to do is simply refresh or reload the data in our table view. But let me take you through the steps here. So we'll just call this within Spots, and load data means essentially load all of the spots. And the first thing that you see down here inside is, and again, our completion handler isn't going to pass a Boolean. We're not going to care if it works or if it doesn't work in here. We're going to print out an error if it doesn't work. Otherwise, it's going to work, and that'll be fine. There's no reason to not load table view if we have nothing in there. It'll just show us an empty table view, and that'll be fine. So what we're going to do here is DB has already been set up and declared in our initializer here. We're going to go into the Spots collection, and we're going to do this thing called add snapshot listener. Now what the snapshot listener is going to do is snapshots are what are considered to be a collection of documents. So what we're going to do here, or they are in our case. So what we're going to do here is this is just going to listen in and see if there are any changes to the stuff that we've got happening inside here. So we're going to get, when the snapshot listener happens here, is it's either going to return what's called a query snapshot, which is a collection of changed data. Otherwise, it's going to return an error. We'll check to see, do we have an error? If we don't, then let's keep going. So if something has changed inside of our Spots data here, remember we're saving that in the Spots class, which is where we are as Spot Array. So again, just to come on over and see where we're working, we're inside of Spots here. Remember, this is the Spot Array right here. This is the class, so we declare an instance of it over inside of spot list view controller.swift here. So this is our spots right here. We're going to call load data in just a bit. And then what we're going to do as part of this is we'll say listen in, and if we have some updates, let's first empty everything out of the spot array. So we'll start from scratch, kind of like what we did when we grabbed some JSON down from the web. And now we're going to say go through this. So after we empty it out, just to make sure that we don't have duplicates. If we didn't empty it out, what we would do is we would simply append more and more stuff onto our spots array, and we have duplicates and stuff. So we just clear it out and we say, hey, we're going to create a new spot array every time, where we're going to work from scratch. Now what we do is inside of this query snapshot that we got back. So this is sort of all of the stuff in the folder that's been updated, changed, all of the new data collectively. And if we go into query snapshot, it has a documents parameter here for each of the documents that we've got. So if we go ahead and take a look in our Cloud Firestore here. So we've only got one document in here right now, but if we had multiple, it would show multiple documents in here. And in fact, the number of documents would be equal to documents.count. So what we see down here is if query snapshot has a documents property which behaves like an array, what we can do is we can say, okay, go through all of the documents in query snapshot here, and on each individual document, what we should do when we loop through this is we should go ahead and create a new spot. So remember, we got rid of all the spots that were in spot array. Spot array is, brackets, capital spot. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, go ahead and create a spot. And what we're going to create the spot from is each document has, if we say document.data, this grabs a dictionary. Remember how we saved the dictionary, those string any key value pairs? We saved those in our save data method. Well, in our load data method, we're going to say, hey, all right, let's take that dictionary, which is, get it by saying document.data. So this gives us a key value pair. It says dictionary in the front, just to remind you of that. And we're going to write a completion handler, which we haven't done before. And it's going to do the opposite of the calculated property for dictionary. It's going to accept a dictionary, and it's going to initialize a new instance of spot. It'll create that spot. The one thing that we don't have in the dictionary is the document ID. And that's because if I go over and take a look at what this thing looks like, this is all the data that will be in a dictionary. So the key string address, so quote address quote is going to have this string. Average rating quote is going to have this number in it. Latitude is going to have this number. Longitude is going to have this number. So we have everything here except for the document ID. And the reason why we don't save the document ID here is the document ID is actually the name of the document. This is this unique name here. So this little chunk of code that we've got right in here will grab the document ID out of the document ID property of the document that we just read in. So we're going through all of the documents here. Grab the dictionary, convert it to a new spot. Also, spot has a document ID property, so that should be the same as this document's document ID property. Then once we've created a new spot, updated any stuff that wasn't updated by the dictionary call, then what we're going to do is just say append the spot to our spot array. Once we're done with all of this, we say completed, boom, we're done. Now, this is going to be what the dictionary is going to look like. So this is going to be a new convenience initializer. I'm sorry, the convenience initializer that accepts a dictionary. And what we're going to go through is we're going to go through all of the key value pairs. So we simply refer to dictionary and then each of the keys. So key name should be a string, key address should be a string, key average rating should be a double, key number of review should be an int. And what we have down here is we have question marks in all of the data types. And if for some reason they come back as nil, then what we've got here with our nil coalescing operators, we'll say, okay, just pass in blanks or zeros or whatever. So this should work out for us really nicely. And let's go ahead and, and this is how we're going to go ahead and call it within Spot's view controller .swift. We're going to call it within view.did_load. So let's go over to our code and set this up. We'll start off in our spots class here. And the first thing that we're going to do in spots is we're going to create our load data method. So we'll say func load data. And this is also going to have an escaping completion handler here. So we'll say completed : and then escaping. And then we'll say space, and we're not going to pass in any Boolean this time, so we'll just do open and close parenthesis, and then write our arrow, which is a dash greater than, and then open and close parenthesis in here too. And close off our curly braces here. Now we can start writing our code. So the first thing that we're going to do in here is we're going to add this thing called a snapshot listener. So we'll say DB, which again is our instance of our Cloud Firestore database. We've already initialized this. We'll say DB collection, and the collection we're going to listen in on is our spots collection. And by saying .add snapshot listener, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, if there are any changes that happen in any of the spots, then let me know. And what this is going to pass back in my snapshot listener, so I just backspaced over the stuff that was there, and what we're going to get in here are potentially two values. We'll either get query snapshot, so I'm just calling ours query snapshot because you can see that there is a data structure in here called capital query snapshot, so lowercase or lower camel case query snapshot is a good name. Or we'll say comma error, and again make sure it's lowercase, you didn't select just the class name there. And for error it should be just error, again lowercase here. And then we'll say in, I'll do a space after the in just so that I don't put in the graphic in there. So again, what's going to happen is if we get any changes at all in spots, then this listener is going to go off, and it's either going to say, hey, here is the data that I got back, so that's what a query snapshot is, or I got an error. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to check to see if we have an error. So we'll say guard error equals nil. So this is the default, continue if we don't have any error. That's what we mean by equals nil. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we got to have a return clause in here. We'll just say return completed, and that's looking good. Now, also, why don't we go ahead and print a message to the console if we do have an error. So we'll just say print and star, capital error, adding the snapshot listener, and I'll close quotes at the end, but inside I'll do some string interpolation, and I can say error. I can force unwrap because I know that error is not nil here, and I'll say dot localized description. So just we'll see, what the error is. However, if I don't have an error, what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to go ahead and I am going to clear out what I've got in my spot array here. So I'll say self.spotArray equals open and close square brackets here. So again, spot array is an array of spot. By saying open and close square bracket, we say we are going to start with nothing in here. If we didn't, we would already potentially have some stuff in the spot array, and when we append values here, we'd be appending new data on top of our old data, which is not what we want to show up in our table view. So we say clear out our spot array, which is everything that we were storing in our table view, and now what we're going to do is, so I'll put in a little comment in here. There are query snapshot.documents.count documents in the spots snapshot. So what this means is, we're coming back here, we get query snapshot, and if we say .documents, we'll have all of the documents that exist inside of spots. So that's by saying, hey, there was a change here. If we had a whole bunch of different spots here, all of these would be in there. And if we say .documents, we would refer to an array that has all of these documents in it. So since this has the characteristics of an array, we can say for document in query snapshot, and we'll do force unwrap documents, and we can force unwrap here because we know we got a query snapshot back. And open and close parentheses here. So this is going to go through each of the documents. So, if you've got Shake Shack and El Polone and Neptune Oyster House, it'll go through all of them one by one. Now, what are we going to do in here? Well, we need to create a new spot for each document. So we'll say let spot equal, and what we're going to do is we're going to call an initializer we haven't written yet. And this initializer is going to accept a dictionary property, and what we're going to pass in is document, and look what happens when we say .data. What the data does is it gets the data here, and it will give us a key value pair dictionary. So each document has a parameter, which is the dictionary. Remember how we saved a dictionary out? Well, this is going to load a dictionary up for us. And we haven't written this yet inside of our spot class. But let's just assume that we've written it, and we'll go back and write it later. So this takes the dictionary out of the document, creates a new spot. Now, there's one other thing that we need to do, too, is we need to say spot.document ID, and that's going to equal our document.document ID. So, and I'll show you why we need this. If we go over to our, to take a look at the data here, so I'm clicking on an individual spot. Notice that I've got all of the data in here except for my document ID. The reason why I don't store my document ID in the data is that this is the document ID. It's the name of the document. So if I just refer to the name of the document, I've got my document ID. So that's why it's not part of my stuff that I'm reading in from the data in the doc, but I go ahead and just reassign it to the document ID property. And then once we have that, we can simply say self.spotarray.append, and what we're going to append in here is just spot, this element that we've created. And then when we've gone through all of this, so outside of the curly brace for the for loop, we'll simply say completed and then open and close parenthesis. Now the reason we're getting an error in here is we've got to go back and we've got to write this this convenience initializer here. So we're going to pass in a dictionary and we're going to create a spot from it. So we click on spot. And you see how we've got our initializer here. This is a convenience initializer here. We're going to type after this convenience initializer, we're going to say convenience init, and this is going to accept dictionary, which is just our label here. But that this label is going to refer to a string :any in here. So again, what we're saying is let's initialize a new instance which is going to accept a string any in here. And now what we need to do for all for every time we go ahead and call a convenience initializer is we eventually got to go up and we've got to call the main initializer in here. So you see how we did that right here? This is just our call statement. We have to do something similar down here. So we'll say self.init, and this is the primary initializer, the base initializer here, but we need to put some values in here. How are we going to get the values? Well, the values that we're going to have, we'll create them one by one here. So we'll say let name equal, and then we'll do another one for, you know, the other different values in there for address and stuff. But this is going to be dictionary, which is our key value pair here. And if we say dictionary, the way dictionaries work is instead of putting an index in, you simply put in the name of the key, and then it will give you the value out of it. So, you know, if we say, well, what is our name for our key? Oh yeah, it's name. So we just put in name in between quotes. I'm just copying them out of the values up here because this will prevent me from having any errors. And again, there's some techniques that can be used to prevent, you know, have one set of string literals set up someplace and just continue to refer to these. I'll just copy and paste though for interest of speed here. So what is this? So we go ahead and we get name, and remember how it says string any? So now we need to tell it what data type it is. So we're going to say as exclamation point, and we'll say string question mark, and then we'll do question mark. If for some reason we get a nil value for the string that comes back, then we're going to do empty string. And we're going to do the same thing here. So we're going to say let address, equal dictionary, open bracket, quote, address, close quote, close open bracket, as exclamation point, string question mark, then question mark for the nil coalescing operator, and then empty string. Next thing we need is, so we're not going to do coordinate in here. What we're going to do is we're going to say let, and I want to do them in the order that they're listed in here. So yeah, here comes the coordinate. So we're going to say let latitude equal, and we're going to get this out of the dictionary. So what we'll do first is we'll say, all right, latitude is going to be our key here for our, what we're going to unwrap this as is it's going to be a CL location degrees, which is just the same thing as a double, but we'll use CL location degrees in here. Question mark, and then question mark, and since it's effectively a double, we can say 0.0. We're going to do the same thing down here, so I'm just going to copy and paste this line in here for longitude, and that's going to be the key here, longitude as well. And so remember, I'm reading these off of the dictionary I got off of disk. So now that I've got my latitude and my longitude, so that's not the calculated value that I've used here. I've just grabbed them off of disk and I've put them in these local constants. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say let coordinate equal, and this is going to be CL location coordinate 2D. If I open parentheses here, I can just pass in latitude and longitude, and I'm going to pass in the latitude and longitude constants that I just created. So so that's looking good, and I won't have to worry about you know, optionals or anything like that, because up here, if I have nils in the value, it's just going to put in zeros. So this is looking good. Then I will say let, what have we got, average rating? Let average rating equal dictionary, open bracket, quotes, average rating, close quote, as exclamation point, double, question mark, then question mark, 0.0. Let's see, number of reviews equal dictionary, you guessed it, open bracket, double quote, number of reviews, close double quote, close bracket, as exclamation point, and this is an int, int question mark, then question mark, and it'll be 0 if we have a nil value in here. And then the last thing that we need to pay attention to is let posting user ID equal dictionary, open bracket, quotes, and then it's posting user ID, close quotes, close bracket, as exclamation point, string question mark, and that'll be empty string. So now that we've got this, I can click right where I say string for name and pass in name, which is just this name value that we created up here. And then we're going to do the same with address. We're going to do the same with coordinate. We're going to do the same with average rating. We're going to do the same with number of reviews. We're going to do the same with posting user ID, and we're going to do the same with document ID. And so hopefully we'll see these warnings go away. I just did a Shift Command K to get rid of this. And so again, we are passing in a dictionary, which was read out of the cloud. And we're saying with this convenience initializer here, hey, create a new instance of Spot. So what this is doing is we're creating a bunch of local values here. Then we're passing in the local values into our base initializer, because you always have to do that from within a convenience initializer. Oh, I have the reason why it's getting grumpy here is we shouldn't have document ID at the end. So I'm just going to get rid of this. Should I? Or, oh yeah, I don't have a document ID in here. So what I'm going to do is, I'm sorry, so document ID, I'm going to pass in here initially empty string. Okay, that's okay. And the reason why is because I'm not reading the document ID out of the dictionary here, because we can see the document ID is not part of the document's data. It is the name of the document. So how do I fill that in? Right now I'm going to put it in as empty string, but if I get back into spots.swift, what I have down here is spot.documentID equals document.documentID. So up here, the document ID is an empty string, but then I get the real document ID from this ID parameter, and I slap that in, and now I do my append, and now I say I'm completed. So if I've completed, then what do? I want to go ahead and load my table view. So I'm going to click on spot list view controller.swift, and in here we can highlight the literals that we did, those 3 values where we appended them to Spot. And the reason why we don't need those in here is now we're going to be able to just say, oh, and we're not going to want to do this in view did load. What we're going to do is we're going to put it in the method that we haven't written yet, which is view will appear. And the reason that we want to do this is if we did it in view did load, and this will just make sure that this code executes whenever. So view did load only executes when the app starts up, but view will appear will execute just before the user returns to our spots list view controller, let's say after they've showed the Google login screen, or if they're coming back from another view controller. So right within here, we can simply say spots.load_data is what we just wrote, and then in here we can say self.tableview.reload_data, and now we can go ahead and build and run. And what I'm going to do is hop over to my console here so that you can see, here we've loaded up Neptune Oyster, which is looking good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the plus button. So this is the only spot that I've got here. But when I click on the plus button, so our load worked great. I'm going to go ahead and say look up place, and why don't I look up, another oyster spot here, Island Creek Oyster Bar. It's right in Commonwealth Ave. I'll click on this. So we populate our fields here. If we click on save, then what happens is, remember, it executes the spot.save data, and it will come back with a Boolean value which either says success is true or success is false. If it's true, I've saved the data here, so then I cancel back, which is I don't need a segue. And the reason why I don't need to do an unwind segue is, remember, we've got just before this view appears, it's going to go and check to see, hey, are there any changes that exist in the snapshot? And if there are changes, let's load in data. So that's why we had the Island Creek load in over here. Now here's something to notice. I've logged in as John Gallagher here. So if I click over here, not on Neptune Oyster, but on Island Creek Oyster, John Gallagher, see the posting user ID? It says ZOKB. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on authentication in my console here, and we see John Gallagher is ZOKB. So John Gallagher posted that. Now I'm going to show you something going back to database here. So I've got 2 spots in, and let me show you my simulator here. I am going to go into my into Xcode, and I'm going to select, so I have my device, my personal iPhone, which is also on my local area network here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build and run on that. Now what's happening here is I'm actually going to run the app, and I'm able to actually debug or see what shows up in the console here. Not only what I'm seeing right here, which is in my simulator, But what you are not seeing is I've actually got my iPhone in my hand, so a second device. And what I'm going to do is, you see how this was associated with John Gallagher? What I'm going to do on my device is I'm going to log in as Prof. Gallagher. And what I'm going to do as Prof. Gallagher as well is I am going to go ahead and add a new record. Now again, most of the time when you add records and apps, you've got to do a pull to refresh down here and it will refresh it. But what Cloud Firestore does, because we set up that snapshot listener, is it's constant listening, and it will do the equivalent of the pull to refresh for us. It'll just go ahead and re-execute if there are any changes here. So this is John Gallagher in the simulator. What you don't see now is the iPhone that I have in my hands. I'm going ahead and I'm going to look up one of my favorite places to eat, which isn't too far from campus here. You might be wondering, oh, Gallagher, what is this? Well, when I click on the save button right now, 1, 2, 3, save, you'll see, whoa, it's updated automatically. We saw it update here, we saw it update here, and let's verify. So we saw, remember, that the posting user for Neptune Oyster that we just added was ZOK. What about this new value that we just added when we click on it? It's Shake Shack, and that's posted by Y4ZT. Who is Y4ZT? If we click on authentication, oh, Y4ZT is Prof. Gallagher. So we saw in real time another user was logged into the database, and they posted a record, and the listener, which was listening in here, detected some changes and updated those changes for us. You are full stack, baby. You've got real-time database updates happening from the cloud. You're saving data. You're loading data. You should feel great about your skills. We got more to learn in Snacktacular, but you've really got a lot of the components here now, so you can start building your own social apps. And hopefully you'll see that the framework and the approach that we've used here is really repeatable. If you want to create things that are similar to this, keep at it.